Putting God first is not about a religious checklist or a performance of rituals. It is about choosing to anchor your life in the one who created it. Think about how often we build our days around everything else. We wake up with our minds already racing about tasks, deadlines, and messages waiting for us. We spend energy planning what we want, chasing after what others think is important, and only at the end of the day, if there is time left, we whisper a quick prayer. That is living with God as an afterthought. To put Him first is to flip that order, to begin with Him, to carry Him into the middle of your day, and to close your night with Him still on your mind. It is a conscious decision to let your priorities be reshaped by His presence. There is a kind of intimacy that comes with putting God first, the same way a relationship deepens when you make someone your priority. If you only show up when it's convenient, the bond never grows strong. But when you consistently make space, when you choose them before distractions, they feel cherished. God is the same way. When you give Him the first of your attention, you start to feel His closeness in ways you cannot explain. The emptiness that often lingers even after success or pleasure begins to shrink because your spirit is being filled at the source. And that fullness gives you strength to face everything else with a different kind of confidence. Putting God first also means letting Him have the first word in your decisions. We like to believe we can handle everything ourselves, that our logic and instincts are enough. But the truth is, many of our choices are made in reaction to fear, pressure, or desire. When you pause to ask, "What does God say about this?" you slow down the rush of emotions and let wisdom enter. It's not about expecting a voice from the clouds. It's about aligning your choices with His word, trusting that obedience will always take you further than shortcuts ever could. And every time you do that, you are planting seeds of stability that grow into long-term peace. There is also a layer of surrender in putting Him first. That surrender is not weakness, it is strength disguised as trust. People often confuse surrender with giving up, but in truth it is the opposite. When you hand over your worries, your ambitions, and your battles to God, you are not quitting, you are placing them in the hands of the only one strong enough to carry them fully. Imagine the relief of not having to hold everything together all the time, of not waking up with your chest tight because you think it all depends on you. That relief is what comes when God is first, because your life no longer stands on shaky ground, but on a foundation that cannot be broken. Putting God first reshapes your relationships too. When He comes before anyone else, you stop expecting people to be your source of happiness, validation, or identity. That shift changes everything. Instead of clinging to someone out of fear of losing them, you love with freedom. Instead of bending your values to keep someone close, you stand with integrity. Because you know the one who is first in your life already secures your worth, you stop settling for less than you deserve. This is how faith, even in personal love and intimacy, creates healthier bonds, because they are not built on desperation but on strength. Even in the hidden moments of life, putting God first brings a new perspective. When no one is watching and you feel unnoticed, it is easy to slip into bitterness or self-pity. But if God is first, your motivation changes. You no longer need the applause of others to validate your effort. You work, you create, you love, because you know He sees you. That quiet confidence becomes a shield against the emptiness of comparison. While others burn themselves out trying to prove their value, you move with peace because you already know who holds your future. Putting God first is also about how you manage your desires and impulses. Our culture tells us to chase what feels good in the moment, even if it leaves us empty later. But when you honor God before your wants, you develop a deeper kind of discipline. You start to see pleasure not as the ultimate goal, but as a gift that flows naturally when life is aligned. This doesn't mean you deny yourself joy. It means your joy is rooted in something greater than fleeting feelings. That steadiness protects you from cycles of regret, and teaches you how to enjoy life with balance and gratitude. Every area of life bends in a better direction when God is first. Your work finds new purpose, not just a paycheck. Your struggles become testimonies instead of prisons. Your dreams expand beyond what you thought possible, because they are no longer limited by your vision, but lifted by His. This golden key Jesus gave us is not a secret to be hidden, it is a truth to be lived daily. And every time you choose to place Him above everything else, you unlock another layer of the life you were created to live. Matthew 6:33 is one of those verses that can sound simple at first glance, but when you let it sink in, it carries a weight that can change how you approach life. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. It's a promise wrapped in instruction. The order is clear. First, seek Him. Not when it's convenient, not as a backup plan, but as the priority. And then, everything else you are worried about, provision, direction, stability, even love, will follow. We spend so much energy trying to reverse that order, chasing after all these things first, and only turning to God when exhaustion or disappointment leaves us empty. But the verse is a reminder that peace and fulfillment flow when we get the order right. When you think about seeking first, it's not about adding another task to your to-do list. It's about reorienting your desires. The kingdom of God is not some faraway concept, it's the presence of God reigning in your life right now. Seeking it means making choices that reflect His character, His values, and His heart. It means pausing before speaking in anger. It means choosing honesty even when lying feels easier. It means carving out moments to connect with Him before you start scrolling or working. These are not grand gestures but steady acts of faith that signal, God, you come before everything else. And when you do that consistently, the verse assures that the rest of life will begin to align itself in surprising ways. This verse also carries a layer of intimacy. To seek first is to hunger for closeness with Him, the way you long for someone you deeply love. Think about how relationships flourish when pursuit is mutual. If one person is always chasing while the other is distracted, the bond feels shallow. But when both lean in, when both make the other a priority, the relationship deepens into something unshakable. With God, it's the same. He already seeks us, and when we return that pursuit by making Him first, the connection strengthens. You begin to sense His nearness in ordinary moments, like a whisper of comfort when anxiety rises or a spark of clarity when confusion clouds your thoughts. That is how all these things start to be added, not always in material form, but in the inner security that no circumstance can take away. There is also a discipline woven into this verse. We live in a culture that rewards busyness, where every minute is accounted for and every distraction is one click away. Seeking first requires intention, a willingness to step back from noise and give attention to what matters most. That discipline is like training a muscle. At first it feels unnatural, even inconvenient, but the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. Over time, it shifts from effort to desire. You don't seek God because you feel guilty if you don't. You seek Him because you've tasted the difference it makes, and now you crave that connection. And in that craving, your priorities realign without the struggle they once carried. Another layer to all these things will be added is the way God provides when we stop trying to control everything. Human instinct is to grab tightly at what we fear losing, whether it's money, opportunities, or relationships. But that tight grip often leaves us more anxious, because we're relying on ourselves to make everything work. When you choose to seek Him first, you're loosening that grip. You're saying, God, I trust you with the details. And in that trust, unexpected provision arrives. Doors you couldn't open on your own begin to open. People who are meant for your life cross your path at the right time. Solutions you hadn't even considered begin to unfold. It's not luck. It's the natural result of putting Him in His rightful place. This verse is also a challenge against fear. Most of our striving comes from fear of lack, fear we won't have enough, fear we won't be loved, fear we won't succeed. But when Jesus tells us to seek first, He is also telling us to stop letting fear run the show. He is reminding us that God already knows what we need, and He is faithful to provide. Fear makes us hoard, rush, and compromise, but faith makes us steady, patient, and whole. Seeking the kingdom first is like turning your eyes away from the shadows and fixing them on the light, trusting that the path ahead will reveal itself one step at a time. What makes this verse so powerful is its practicality. You can test it in your own life. Instead of starting your day with worry, start it with prayer. Instead of chasing validation from people, root your identity in God's approval. Instead of letting stress dictate your choices, let peace guide you. When you begin to do this, even in small ways, you'll notice that what once felt heavy becomes lighter. The things you thought you needed so desperately either come naturally or lose their hold on you altogether. That is the quiet miracle of seeking first. Your life doesn't just change on the surface, it transforms from within. So when you read Matthew 6 verse 33, don't see it as a distant promise written for someone else. See it as an invitation for you, right now. It's a reminder that you don't have to exhaust yourself trying to piece everything together. You don't have to spend your days running in circles after things that never satisfy. You have a clear and simple key: put the kingdom first, put His righteousness above your impulses, and watch as the pieces of your life start to fit in ways they never did when you tried to force them alone. Faith in storms is one of the most honest ways to understand what it really means to trust God. Anyone can feel confident when life is smooth, when bills are paid, when love is steady, and when health feels unshakable. But storms come, and they always come in different forms. Sometimes it is the sudden loss of someone we love. Sometimes it is betrayal from a person we thought would never hurt us. Sometimes it is an illness that shakes our body, or a financial weight that feels impossible to carry. In those moments, faith is no longer a concept you talk about, it becomes the ground you either stand on or sink in. Faith does not erase the storm, but it tells you where to plant your feet while it rages. When the winds of life start howling, fear becomes loud. It tells you that you are alone, that you won't make it through, that everything you built is about to fall apart. And if you listen long enough, those thoughts start to sound believable. But faith interrupts fear with a different voice. It says, "Yes, the storm is real, but so is God." Faith is not pretending the pain isn't there or ignoring the size of the waves. It is acknowledging the reality of the storm while choosing to believe that God is greater than what you see. That choice is not always easy, but it is powerful. It keeps your heart from drowning in despair even when the circumstances refuse to change. Think of the disciples in the boat when the storm hit the sea. They panicked, even though Jesus was right there with them. That story shows how natural it is to be overwhelmed by fear when storms strike. But it also shows the difference when faith is present. Jesus stood up and spoke to the storm, and it obeyed. The lesson is not only that He can calm storms outside of us, but that His presence calms the storm within us. Faith says, "Even if the waves keep crashing, I know who is in the boat with me." And when that truth sinks in, the fear loses its power to dictate how you act, think, or feel. Storms also reveal what your faith is built on. If your confidence is only rooted in your circumstances, then storms will always tear it apart. But if your faith is rooted in God Himself, you can bend without breaking. That is why Scripture calls Him a rock. A rock doesn't remove the storm, but it gives you something solid to cling to. And just like a tree grows stronger roots when the wind forces it to stand firm, your faith digs deeper during hardship. The very storm that threatens to destroy you can end up shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more unshakable than before. Faith in storms is also deeply personal because it changes how you carry yourself. Without faith, fear leaks into every area of life. It makes you react in anger when you're scared, it makes you doubt yourself, and it makes you lose patience with people around you. But when you lean into faith, there is a steadiness that surprises even you. You may not know how things will work out, but there is a quiet assurance inside you that says, "God has not left me." That assurance affects how you talk, how you make decisions, and how you treat others. It doesn't mean the storm isn't hard, but it means you are not swallowed by it. Another thing storms do is strip away illusions. They force you to see what really matters. When everything feels like it's falling apart, the little things you used to obsess over suddenly don't hold the same weight. That is the refining nature of storms. They burn away distractions and leave behind clarity. Faith helps you recognize that clarity and embrace it instead of resenting it. You start to see that storms, painful as they are, can carry hidden blessings. They can make you more compassionate, more grateful, more present, because you have felt what it is like to almost lose what you once took for granted. The beauty of faith in storms is that it is contagious. When others see you walk through hardship with peace that doesn't make sense, they notice. They may not understand your prayers or your trust in God, but they see the difference it makes. That witness is powerful. It doesn't mean you never cry or struggle, but it means you don't crumble the way fear wants you to. Your calm in the storm becomes a light for someone else caught in their own. In that way, your faith not only carries you, it becomes a shelter for others. At the heart of it, storms are not meant to destroy faith but to test it and refine it. They ask the question, do you believe only when life is good, or do you believe when nothing makes sense? And it is in answering that question, over and over, that faith grows stronger. Every storm becomes a story of survival, a memory you can look back on and say, I didn't think I'd make it, but God carried me. Those stories become the evidence that builds courage for the next storm. They remind you that faith is not fragile, it is resilient, and it thrives not in the absence of storms, but in the middle of them. The word, rapture, often makes people think only about the end, a sudden event when everything changes in an instant. But if you look closer, it's not only about what will happen someday, it's also about how you choose to live right now. The thought of being called up to meet Christ is not meant to fill you with fear or speculation, it is meant to keep your eyes lifted higher than the distractions around you. Too often, we live as though this world is permanent, as if the money we earn, the houses we buy, or the titles we chase will last forever. The reminder of the rapture shakes us awake, reminding us that life here is temporary and that eternity is real. That perspective changes how you walk through each day, because you stop clinging so tightly to what will not last and start focusing on what truly matters. Living with the awareness of the rapture is like carrying a compass in your heart that always points you toward eternity. It doesn't mean you stop caring about your responsibilities, your work, or your relationships. It means you carry them with a deeper sense of purpose. You start asking yourself different questions. Instead of, how much can I get out of this? You begin to ask, how can this honor God? Instead of living as though tomorrow is promised, you cherish the time you have and invest it wisely. That shift is subtle, but it changes the flavor of your life. Suddenly the small moments, kind words, acts of love, quiet faithfulness, become the treasures that align you with eternity. When you think of the rapture only as a faraway event, it can feel disconnected from your daily life. But when you see it as a call to live prepared, it becomes a guide for every choice you make. Being prepared is not about fear or obsession, it is about living awake. It's about refusing to drift through life half asleep, letting habits, addictions, or bitterness control you. The awareness of eternity becomes a light that exposes what no longer belongs in your life. It stirs you to let go of grudges, to seek forgiveness, to love people with urgency. Because if you believe you could stand before God at any moment, you start to value honesty, kindness, and purity in ways you didn't before. The reminder of the rapture also reshapes how you handle pain. When suffering feels endless, when losses stack on your heart, it is easy to believe that this is all there is. But when you hold on to the truth of eternity, the pain does not crush you in the same way. You remember that every tear, every hardship, every sacrifice has meaning beyond the moment. The Apostle Paul said that the struggles of this life are temporary compared to the eternal weight of glory waiting ahead. That perspective doesn't erase the ache, but it gives you endurance. You can walk through valleys with hope because you know they are not the end of the story. It also changes how you see success. The world measures success by wealth, beauty, and applause. But when you live with the rapture in mind, success is redefined. True success is not about building a kingdom for yourself, but living in a way that reflects the kingdom of God. It's measured in faithfulness, in love, in obedience. You realize that standing before God one day with a pure heart is worth far more than standing before people with trophies or titles. That doesn't mean you shouldn't dream big or work hard, but it means your dreams are surrendered to Him, and your work becomes an offering, not just an achievement. Thinking about the rapture also exposes how fragile excuses are. We often delay doing what we know is right because we tell ourselves there is time. Time to change, time to heal, time to start living with intention. But if you live with the awareness that Christ could return at any moment, you stop postponing obedience. You stop saying, I'll forgive when I'm ready. Or, I'll follow God when life slows down. you realize that the time is now. That urgency does not create panic, it creates focus. It pushes you to align your heart today instead of gambling with tomorrow. Living with this mindset also brings freedom from fear. Many people dread the thought of the end, imagining it with anxiety. But if your life is already aligned with God, the thought of being with Him becomes a source of peace. Instead of fearing what's ahead, you start longing for it, the way you long to be reunited with someone you deeply love. That longing doesn't make you reckless in this life, it makes you intentional. It fills your days with meaning because you know that everything you do echoes in eternity. And that knowledge keeps you from wasting time on things that drain your soul without feeding it. At its core, the rapture is both a promise and a call. A promise that this world is not all there is, and a call to live as though heaven is your home. It's a reminder to hold your head high when life weighs you down, because your story does not end in struggle. It is an invitation to live fully awake, to walk each day with the awareness that every choice shapes not just your present but your eternity. And in that awareness, you find clarity, urgency, and peace that nothing in this world can take away. Putting God first is not about grand gestures that the world notices, it is about the small, quiet acts of obedience that shape your heart over time. Daily obedience is where real faith lives. Anyone can say they love God, but it is in those ordinary moments, choosing honesty when no one is watching, offering forgiveness when it hurts, or praying before making a decision, that faith becomes real. These are not dramatic displays, but steady choices that, when stacked day after day, form a life anchored in God. Just like intimacy in a relationship grows not from occasional big gestures but from consistent presence, your intimacy with God deepens through these simple, daily acts of putting Him first. Prayer is often the first way daily obedience shows itself. Not just the prayers whispered in crisis, but the prayers you offer when life feels ordinary. To pause in the morning before the rush begins and say, "Lord, guide my steps today," is more powerful than you realize. It is not about fancy words or long speeches. It is about showing Him you want His presence woven into the fabric of your day. Every time you stop to invite Him in, you are training your heart to depend less on your own strength and more on His wisdom. That habit builds a steady rhythm of trust, and over time, it changes how you respond to challenges, because prayer has become your first instinct rather than your last resort. Another way obedience shows up daily is in integrity. It's easy to compromise when no one is watching, to cut corners or tell half-truths that make life easier in the moment. But putting God first means choosing integrity, even when it costs you something. That quiet choice shapes your character. It means you would rather please God than impress people. And while the world might not always reward you right away, you gain something far greater: a conscience that is clear, a spirit that is strong, and a life that is not built on shifting lies but on solid truth. Each moment of integrity is a small act of worship, a way of saying, "God, you matter more than convenience." Forgiveness is another daily act of obedience that tests us. Holding grudges feels natural, because pain demands justice. But putting God first means trusting Him enough to release the weight of resentment. Forgiveness is not about excusing what someone did, it is about freeing yourself from carrying the poison. Each time you choose forgiveness, even in small doses, you are saying, "I refuse to let bitterness control me." That obedience doesn't just honor God, it also heals you. It makes space in your heart for peace to enter where anger once lived. Forgiveness is one of the hardest acts of faith, but it is also one of the most transformative, because it loosens the chains that hold both your spirit and your relationships captive. Trust is perhaps the most personal form of obedience. It's easy to trust God when things are clear, when doors are opening, and when prayers are answered quickly. But trust is proven in the spaces where clarity is missing, where you have to move forward even though you cannot see the whole path. Each time you choose trust instead of fear, you are placing God in His rightful position as the one who knows the beginning and the end. That act of surrender does not mean you stop working hard or making plans. It means you hold those plans with open hands, ready for Him to guide, redirect, or reshape them. And in that trust you find freedom, because you no longer carry the crushing pressure of needing to control everything yourself. The beauty of daily obedience is that it adds up quietly. A single prayer may not feel like much, one moment of honesty may go unnoticed, a choice to forgive may not erase the sting, and trusting God in uncertainty may still feel shaky. But when you add these acts together over days, weeks, and years, they create a life that radiates faith. They become the threads that weave a deep relationship with God, one that sustains you in joy and in hardship. And often, the blessings that come from obedience do not arrive in dramatic flashes but in the steady transformation of your heart, making you more patient, more grounded, and more full of peace. Obedience also protects you from the trap of living by feelings alone. Feelings are real, but they are also fleeting. If you only pray when you feel like it, or forgive when it feels easy, or trust when everything looks certain, your faith will always rise and fall with your emotions. Daily obedience keeps you steady when feelings are unstable. It trains you to choose what is right over what is comfortable. And as you keep walking that path, feelings eventually follow. Joy, peace, and love become not just emotions but fruits of a faithful life, growing naturally out of consistent choices to honor God first. In the end, daily obedience is not about perfection but about persistence. It is about showing up again and again, even when you stumble, even when you feel weak. Every act of prayer, integrity, forgiveness, and trust is a seed. Some days it feels like nothing is growing, but beneath the surface, roots are digging deeper. Over time, those roots hold you steady in storms and lift you higher in seasons of blessing. And all of it begins with small, often unseen choices to put God first in the daily rhythms of life. Putting God first is often misunderstood as a restriction, like a list of rules meant to take away freedom or enjoyment. But the reality is the opposite. When God comes first, you discover a freedom you never knew was possible. Instead of being chained to the constant need to perform, impress, or control outcomes, you find yourself grounded in something secure. The freedom comes from knowing that your worth does not rise and fall with other people's opinions or with your own successes and failures. It allows you to breathe easier, because you no longer have to carry the impossible weight of being your own savior. That release is the kind of freedom that feels both peaceful and powerful. Fear is one of the strongest forces that holds people back. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. It creeps into every area of life and convinces you to play small or to cling tightly to things you should have let go of long ago. When you put God first, fear begins to lose its grip. Faith does not mean you never feel afraid, but it means fear no longer dictates your choices. Instead of being driven by the worst-case scenario, you begin to step forward trusting that God's hand is steady even when you cannot see the outcome. That trust doesn't remove risk, but it makes you braver, because your confidence is not built on fragile circumstances but on an unshakable foundation. Pressure is another heavy weight that falls away when you choose to put God first. So many people live as though their value is determined by what they produce or how much they achieve. They measure their worth in promotions, relationships, and applause. That constant striving creates exhaustion because it is never enough. But when God is first, your perspective shifts. You still work hard, you still pursue excellence, but you do it out of love instead of pressure. Your worth is no longer tied to how much you accomplish, but to the fact that you are already loved and chosen by Him. That truth makes every effort lighter, because you are no longer chasing approval, you are living from a place of already having it. Control is another illusion that crumbles when God comes first, and with its fall comes freedom. We like to believe we can control every detail, planning our lives to the last step. But control is exhausting because life refuses to obey our plans. Disappointments, delays, and detours are inevitable. When you put God first, you surrender the illusion of control without losing direction. You still plan, you still prepare, but you hold those plans with open hands. That surrender is not defeat, it is trust. And in that trust you find relief. You no longer have to panic when things don't unfold the way you imagined, because you know that His way, even when it interrupts yours, is better and wiser than anything you could force. There is also freedom in identity when God comes first. Without Him, people often define themselves by relationships, careers, or appearance. And when any of those crumble, their sense of self crumbles with it. But when your identity is rooted in God, it cannot be shaken by circumstances. You can lose a job without losing your value. You can walk away from a toxic relationship without feeling worthless. You can age without losing your beauty, because your worth is not tied to fading things. That unshakable identity creates a confidence that is steady and attractive, because it is no longer fragile. You know who you are, not because of what you do or who you're with, but because of who holds you. Putting God first also creates space for joy that isn't dependent on conditions. Most people chase joy through possessions, experiences, or achievements, but those highs fade quickly. When God is first, joy becomes rooted in His presence, which doesn't fade with circumstances. Even on hard days, you can find moments of peace, laughter, or gratitude because your joy isn't built on what's happening around you, but on who is within you. That kind of joy is deeper and steadier, and it carries you through both highs and lows with a lightness that the world cannot replicate. Relationships also transform when you live with God first. Instead of clinging to people to complete you, you show up whole and steady. You stop demanding from others what only God can give, and that shift makes your connections healthier and more genuine. You can love without fear of losing yourself. You can give without expecting constant return. And you can walk away when necessary without feeling empty. That kind of freedom strengthens intimacy, because you're no longer trapped in cycles of insecurity or control. You are free to love because your foundation is already secure in God's love. The freedom that comes from putting God first is not about escaping responsibility or difficulty. It's about living with a lightness that comes from trust. You are no longer driven by fear, crushed by pressure, or trapped in the need to control. Instead, you move through life with peace, clarity, and confidence, knowing that you are held, guided, and loved. And in that place, you find the kind of freedom that no achievement, relationship, or possession could ever provide. Most people treat God like an afterthought, someone to fit into the cracks of a schedule once everything else has been taken care of. It's easy to say we believe in Him, but when you look at how our days are structured, He often gets whatever time or energy is left over. That way of living slowly drains the spirit, because it keeps God on the margins instead of at the center. Putting Him first is about flipping that pattern, choosing to build everything else around Him instead of squeezing Him into what remains. It's not about religion or rules, it's about choosing who or what sets the rhythm of your life. Think about how much energy you spend planning your workday, your meals, your routines, your responsibilities. Those things matter, but if they dominate your priorities while your soul gets scraps, the imbalance eventually shows. Putting God first is deciding that your inner life deserves the same attention as your outer life. It means carving out moments that belong to Him before anyone or anything else can claim them. When you do that, you're no longer trying to live on spiritual leftovers. You're feeding your spirit before the world has a chance to drain it. That shift changes not just your day but your entire sense of stability. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with stress, burnout, and emptiness is because they keep trying to run on their own strength. When God is given the margins instead of the center, life feels heavier than it has to be. Starting with Him, on the other hand, adds clarity and direction that makes everything else lighter. It's like watering roots before expecting fruit. You can push through without it for a while, but eventually exhaustion shows up. When you structure your life with God at the foundation, you stop forcing yourself to keep everything together. You find that strength flows more naturally, because you're not running on empty. Building your life around Him also shifts how you see time. Instead of constantly feeling like there isn't enough, you begin to experience time differently. When the first moments of your day go to Him, the rest of the day doesn't feel as frantic. It's not that the responsibilities shrink, but that your heart is steadier going into them. The things that once felt overwhelming don't carry the same weight. And the truth is, the time you give to God doesn't take away from your life, it multiplies it. It sharpens your focus, aligns your priorities, and frees you from wasting energy on things that don't matter. Relationships are also shaped by this order of priorities. When God comes first, you're not leaning on others to be your source of peace, joy, or identity. That keeps you from suffocating the people around you with impossible expectations. You enter connections with a sense of fullness instead of emptiness, and that makes love flow more freely. Conflicts no longer define you, disappointments don't break you the same way, and validation isn't the fuel you run on. When God is at the center, you show up whole instead of needy. And when you're whole, you create space for healthier, stronger, and deeper bonds with others. Work also takes on a different meaning when God is not just squeezed in but placed first. Instead of chasing status, wealth, or recognition as your ultimate goal, you begin to see work as an extension of your faith. You work hard not because your worth depends on it but because it becomes a way to honor the gifts you've been given. That shift removes a lot of pressure. Success no longer owns you, and failure doesn't destroy you. When God is the anchor, you pursue excellence without being enslaved to outcomes, because your identity and security are already settled. Even the way you handle struggles changes when He is the priority. Life will still deliver pain, setbacks, and confusion, but your response will be different. Instead of panicking and trying to control everything, you begin with trust. You return to prayer before you spiral into fear. You remind yourself that you don't have to understand everything to rest in the One who does. That simple act of starting with God builds resilience. You stop letting circumstances dictate your mood or mindset, and you learn to hold steady even when storms hit. The difference between fitting God into your schedule and building your schedule around Him is massive. One keeps Him as an accessory, the other makes Him the foundation. And that choice shapes every part of who you are and how you move through life. When you stop treating Him as an add-on and start letting Him define the structure of your days, you begin to notice that peace lasts longer, joy runs deeper, and purpose becomes clearer. That is the quiet power of truly putting Him first. The world teaches you to put yourself first, to chase your desires, to protect your image, and to build your life around what feels good in the moment. It sounds empowering, but it often leaves people empty, restless, and exhausted, because the self was never designed to carry the full weight of meaning. When you put yourself at the center, you end up trapped in comparison, constantly measuring your life against others, never satisfied no matter how much you accomplish. That cycle leaves you hungry for more but never full. God's way is different. He says put Him first, and in doing so, you find the fullness you've been chasing in all the wrong places. Putting God first does not mean you erase yourself or your needs. It means you trust that when your life is aligned with Him, everything else finds its rightful place. The world tells you to fight to be seen, to push your way into recognition, but God says He will lift you up in His timing. That lifting is different than what the world offers, because it doesn't come with the exhaustion of always having to prove yourself. It's a steady rise that cannot be taken away by failure, gossip, or envy. When He elevates you, it is lasting and anchored in something deeper than applause. Self-first living often looks shiny on the outside, but inside it breeds anxiety and insecurity. You can build the career, the body, the reputation, but if it's all about you, the victories taste hollow because there is no grounding. When you put God first, success feels different. It isn't just about what you gain but about how it transforms you. Achievements stop being idols and start being tools to serve a greater purpose. Even setbacks no longer destroy you, because your worth was never hanging on them in the first place. This way of living takes away the panic of loss, because nothing can rob you of what is rooted in Him. The world tells you love yourself above all else, but in practice, that often turns into chasing validation from others to confirm your worth. You start needing constant attention, likes, compliments, or approval to feel secure. But when God is first, you begin to love yourself from a different place. It's no longer about proving you're enough, but about resting in the truth that you were already created with purpose. That foundation makes you stronger in relationships, because you are no longer demanding from others what only God can give. Instead of clinging, you can love freely. Instead of fearing abandonment, you can walk confidently knowing you are never truly alone. The promise of God lifting you higher is not just about external status. It is about internal strength. When you build life around Him, He raises your perspective. You stop being dragged down by temporary frustrations because your eyes are set on something higher. You see beyond the pettiness of competition, beyond the shallow chase for attention, and you begin to value things that last. That kind of vision is powerful, because it keeps you steady when everyone else is restless. It allows you to move differently, to carry peace where others carry chaos, to bring light where others bring bitterness. Living by the world's pattern of putting yourself first often leads to burnout. You push harder, work longer, and sacrifice your peace for the sake of proving yourself. But when God comes first, rest becomes a part of your strength. You learn that pausing is not weakness, but alignment. You realize that slowing down to listen, to pray, to trust, actually takes you further than striving ever could. In this way, He lifts you not just in achievements, but in energy, focus, and renewal. You become more effective without being drained, because your source is no longer your limited willpower but His endless supply. Another way God lifts you higher is through resilience. When you put yourself first, setbacks feel personal, like proof that you're not good enough. But when He is first, setbacks become classrooms. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is He teaching me?" That shift keeps you from collapsing under the weight of disappointment. Instead of being defined by failure, you are refined by it. That resilience is one of the clearest signs that God has truly become your foundation, because you no longer live at the mercy of circumstances. The difference between the world's advice and God's invitation is the difference between temporary shine and eternal strength. Putting yourself first might give you short bursts of recognition, but putting God first gives you peace, joy, and purpose that cannot be stolen. The world tells you to grab what you can before it's gone, but God says trust Him and He will give you more than you could ever hold on your own. It is not about less of you, it is about more of Him, and in that exchange, you discover a life that is richer, freer, and lifted higher than you ever imagined. Ask yourself honestly, how different would your life look if God truly came first in every decision? It's a question that can feel uncomfortable because it forces you to measure what you say you believe against how you actually live. Most people claim faith is important, but when choices show up in the real world, career moves, relationships, money, habits, God often gets pushed to the side. Imagining life with Him at the center means rethinking not just your big decisions but also the quiet, daily ones that seem small but carry the power to shape your future. It means asking, am I building this around my own comfort, or around His will? Think about relationships. Many times, people choose partners based on chemistry, convenience, or loneliness, without ever asking whether God is in that choice. When you put Him first, the question shifts from, do they make me feel good right now? to, do they bring me closer to God or further away? That change alone could save years of heartbreak. It's not about perfection but about alignment. When you bring God into those decisions, you stop settling for connections that drain you or distract you. You begin to value depth over surface, peace over chaos, and purpose over temporary satisfaction. Consider how you approach your work. Most people chase careers that promise money or prestige, then wonder why they feel unfulfilled. If God were first in that decision, the lens would be different. It would not just be, what pays the most? But, what allows me to use my gifts in a way that honors Him? That doesn't mean you can't be ambitious or successful, but it means your ambition is guided by calling instead of ego. That shift brings a different kind of satisfaction. You start to feel that your work is not just about survival or status, but about contribution and service. The stress doesn't disappear, but it transforms into purpose-driven effort instead of endless striving. Even finances change when God comes first. Money is one of the hardest areas to surrender because it feels like security. Yet when God is in the center, money stops being a master and becomes a tool. Instead of chasing it out of fear or clinging to it out of greed, you begin to see it as something entrusted to you. That perspective allows you to give more freely, save more wisely, and spend with clarity instead of impulse. It removes the endless anxiety of, what if I don't have enough? Because you begin to trust the source rather than the resource. That kind of peace can't be bought, but it's given when you choose to trust. Now think about your habits, the small choices that fill your days. How much of your time goes into scrolling, comparing, worrying, or numbing? These habits seem harmless, but over time they steal focus and joy. Putting God first in your habits means choosing to feed your spirit before feeding your distractions. It means starting with prayer before diving into noise, or seeking wisdom before letting worry consume you. It's not about eliminating pleasure or entertainment, it's about refusing to let them rule your life. That daily discipline creates a strength that builds quietly but lasts longer than any quick fix the world offers. Your reactions in difficult moments also reveal whether God is first. When conflict comes, do you run to anger, gossip, or avoidance? Or do you turn to patience, prayer, and forgiveness? Choosing the second path is not easy, but it shows where your heart is anchored. If God is at the center, you start responding instead of reacting. You pause, you breathe, you listen, you remember that peace is more powerful than pride. That shift doesn't just change you, it changes the atmosphere around you. People feel the difference when you carry calm into situations that could have turned toxic. Imagine how your priorities would shift if God was always first. The things that once seemed urgent might not matter so much, and the things you often ignored, kindness, rest, gratitude, integrity, would rise to the surface. Instead of living in constant rush, you'd start to live with intention. Your schedule would look less like a list of endless obligations and more like a reflection of what actually matters. And the surprising part is, you would feel lighter, not heavier. Because alignment always brings peace, while imbalance always breeds chaos. It's worth asking yourself every day, if God came first here, what would I do differently? That single question can expose blind spots, challenge assumptions, and open doors you never saw before. It's not about guilt or perfection, but about honesty. And honesty with yourself is the beginning of transformation. Each choice becomes an opportunity to realign, to step closer to the life you were designed for, the life that feels steady, free, and deeply rooted in something greater than yourself. There is something powerful about the word today. It carries weight that tomorrow never does, because tomorrow always feels far away. Tomorrow is where most people hide their intentions. They say they will change, forgive, pray, or commit when life feels calmer, when circumstances make it easier. But tomorrow never comes in the way we imagine it. Life keeps moving, and delays slowly become habits. Choosing today means breaking that cycle. It means refusing to wait for a perfect moment that may never arrive and instead stepping into obedience now, in the middle of the imperfection. When you choose today, you silence the excuses that have been keeping you stuck. Excuses sound reasonable because they often come dressed as logic. I'll give more when I have more. I'll pray more when I have time. I'll forgive when I feel stronger. But those conditions never truly arrive. Waiting for them is like waiting for a storm to calm before learning to swim. Putting God first is not about finding the ideal setup, it's about choosing Him in whatever setup you have right now. Today is enough because He meets you in it as it is, not as you wish it were. The urgency of today is also tied to the reality of time. None of us knows how much of it we have. That is not meant to frighten but to wake us up. Life is fragile, and pretending we have endless tomorrows robs us of the depth we could experience today. Think of how many apologies are never spoken, how many dreams are never pursued, how many prayers are never prayed because people assumed they had more time. Putting God first today means refusing to live on borrowed time. It means embracing the gift of the moment instead of assuming you'll get another chance. Obedience today may not feel dramatic. It often looks like a small step, a choice to forgive someone, a decision to pray before reacting, a commitment to reorder your priorities. Those steps may feel small, but they build momentum. Waiting until tomorrow keeps you in pause mode, while choosing today moves you into growth. It is in those consistent choices that faith deepens. Today's obedience becomes tomorrow's strength. Each day builds on the one before, and over time, you begin to notice that the person you are becoming is different, steadier, clearer, more anchored. Choosing today also reshapes how you deal with fear. Fear often whispers that you aren't ready yet, that you need more time, more preparation, more assurance. But courage is never built in waiting. Courage is built in doing, even when it feels uncomfortable. When you choose to put God first today, you don't wait for fear to disappear. You step forward in faith while fear is still present. And in that step, you begin to experience His strength. You realize that you were never meant to have it all figured out before obeying. The strength comes as you move, not before. There is also freedom in choosing today because it stops the cycle of regret. Many people live in the tension between the past and the future. They regret what they didn't do yesterday and promise themselves they will do better tomorrow, but they miss the only place change can actually happen: today. When you decide to act now, regret loosens its grip. You may not be able to change yesterday, but you can rewrite the direction of your life starting here. That shift is empowering because it brings focus back to where you actually have control: the choices you make right now. Relationships, too, are transformed by the choice of today. Love spoken today heals wounds. Forgiveness offered today breaks chains. Gratitude expressed today breathes life into someone who may have needed to hear it right then. Waiting until tomorrow to show kindness means missing the opportunity to shape someone's life in the present. When you put God first today, you become more attentive to the people around you, more willing to serve, more present in your connections. It is not about grand gestures but about steady, consistent choices that reflect God's love in daily interactions. The call to choose today is ultimately an invitation to live awake. It's about refusing to drift through life on autopilot, always waiting for a better time. It's about recognizing that faith is not just a belief but a practice that must be lived one day at a time. Each day is a chance to step closer to God, to trust Him more deeply, to let Him reshape your priorities. And when you choose today, you build a life of faith not in theory but in reality, a life that reflects the decision to put Him first in the only moment you're guaranteed to have, right now.